I believe that this was pretty much 100% nylon.
Yeah, it's a good job the studio lights are LEDs, or we wouldn't have been able to film this.
Absolutely. So, Rob, today,
Yeah,
this is a new little episode that we're going to do, which is changing things up a little bit.
it is something we've been asked about a lot. Are we going to look at old shirts? Don't get much older than these guys.
No, for sure. And we've got to thank Subside Sports as well for supplying all of the kits that are on the table.
Yeah.
But what's interesting with some of these, there's actually some brand new kits on here which have harked back to the kits that were designed back in the day, and they've actually designed them exactly how they used to be made.
Recreated,
yeah, which is interesting. But I think, it would be wrong of us to kind of sit here and critique the kits as in, is the Arsenal kit, the piping's rubbish or that, blah, blah, blah. It's not, it's a moment in time, and I think what I would prefer to talk about would be a lot of the kits that are on this table have given me most of the inspiration that I've certainly had when I've come to designing kits.
Yeah, definitely.
Rather than trying to critique the kits, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. I think there'd be one or two technical bits I'd like to talk through that are still influencing the way kits are made today, or even things that were perhaps better back in the day than they are now. So plenty for us to go at with this lot, I think. Let's dive in.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things which is really quite interesting, which I picked up on, was there's a lot of the kits that have actually been manufactured in the country that they're actually playing the sport in.
Yep.
So if you look at the French one, it's made in France.
Yep.
If you look at the Arsenal one, it's made in England. If you look at, these are remakes, but again, these were made in Italy back in the day, where you've got Napoli and stuff.
Got Liverpool Adidas.
The Liverpool Adidas. Yeah, exactly, which is really quite interesting. Even the Barcelona one was made in Spain, which I think just shows where the industry as a whole is gone. Everything's moved over to Asia, which is a little bit sad to some extent, but it's just the progression of the industry, if you like. But here's the thing for you. So if you were to look at this Adidas kit, who comes to your mind as soon as you see that? What are you thinking?
From a design perspective, Bob Marley, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it's the kit that he actually wore in some of those famous photographs.
It's not, but it was of that era because it's got the same honking great big sponsor on the front.
Yeah, but it's interesting with this one because what I love about it is the Trefoil logo. I would love to see that back on modern day kits and see how they would interpret
Knowing what we know about the Adidas brand, do you think that's ever going to happen other than perhaps as a one-off or something? Because by all accounts, they're actually moving it on again this season to just be like the 3-block mounting thing without the word mark underneath it.
Yeah, I would love to think that they would bring it back because it has such a historical place in football kits. It's like in golf, if you think of the Leyland Scott Golden Eagle. Maybe it's 10 years ago, they went with the green. And everyone's like, why on earth have you put it in green? And it was just this hierarchy within their business. Now, if you look at it all, it's all gone back to the Golden Eagle, which absolutely made sense. So I think with regards to this, I'd love to think it would come back. And what I love about this is it's quite an interesting application. So this, for those people that don't know, is flock. But what tends to be the case now is this kind of treatment is used in more lifestyle products away from the sports arena, simply because it's not really that performance driven.
Yeah, it's not very robust.
No, and when these things wet out, it does actually degrade down quite a bit, which is why it's used in a lot of lifestyle products. So if you're familiar with a brand called Abercrombie and Fitch, or if you look at some of the Ralph Lauren stuff, flock is being used quite heavily then to make the garments look distressed and old, when really it's a brand new garment. But this one and the French kit, which I would then let you talk about, there was a style that I did for Barcelona, and Ronaldinho was playing for them at the time, and it was like a tan colour. And we put a baby stripe through the design, and that came from exactly these kits. Because at the time, the Adidas kits had these really fine pinstripe. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a Liverpool yellow kit with a fine red stripe through. So my creative directions at the time then, on all my sheets, I had references to all these kits. And that's what's beautiful about everything that's in front of us. The fact that these are the reference points where we get a lot of our inspiration of designing kits from.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first shirts that I did, I think Switzerland wore it, some of the other national teams at the time, and it was inspired by Johan Cruyff, who was a Puma athlete, but when he was playing for the Netherlands, instead of having the 3 Adidas stripes on the sleeve, he'd always
he pulled
peel
one off,
off. Yeah, so he was only playing in 2 stripes. So we did a jersey that spoke to that era and had 2 stripes on the sleeve and had basically this collar. So, I mean, it was a very literal interpretation of the collar, but it just needed to be a direct homage to him. And something that I love about this collar, and we still see variations of it today, you'll have seen it in the Puma Ultra Weave shirt, but the insert here is still something that's influencing kits today, and it actually comes from the very early crew sweatshirts where there wasn't any stretch in the material. So the only way that people could get their head actually through the collar was by having the big triangular insert on the front. And it still kind of bears true in garments today. It still gets used a lot. So even though this thing is probably getting on for 40 years old now, the idea started way before that, and it still hasn't been bettered.
I remember we actually did one for Man United away when I was at Nike. And you just kind of reminded us, because I remember when I was looking at a lot of these things, I was always a little bit concerned about how it was finished on the inside.
Yeah.
So if you look at those Man United kits, 2004, 2005, if you actually if you've got that kit, turn it to the inside and you'll actually see how I finished it off on the inside. We put a piece of tape and detail down each side, which was just an extra piece of fabric. It wasn't taped in as such. And I remember when I presented it to Nike, they were like, why have you done that on the inside? And I says, well, the whole idea and the concept behind it is when the players are putting it on, it looks a lot more refined and considered. And they were going to try and get us to pull it out. But I was adamant that I wanted to stick to it. And they were like, well, why don't you put it on the outside? And I thought, well, if I put it on the outside, it's not going to mimic that neckline, is it?
Yeah.
So there's some of the times you've got to compromise some of your designs, as you well know. But in that particular case, I was adamant I wanted to take inspiration from this.
Yeah.
But what we did is we modernised it a wee bit by getting rid of some of this stuff, the overlock and stitch.
I think that's a really good example of where the modern shirts and modern approach to design have taken the original idea and moved it on a bit. I think an example of perhaps somewhere that things have gone backwards a little bit is if you look at the pinstripes on both of these shirts, that's knitted directly into the fabric, whereas these days that would be printed. And in fact, with this, you would expect that it would probably be a white-based shirt with all of this printed. And it'd be white inside, but just the quality that you feel from looking at it, and it's just been knitted specifically for this shirt.
Yeah, although the one kit that I would say has been done really well this year, Liverpool home kit. So if you look at the link here, you'll see the review that we had of that, and that was the pinstripe, if you remember, when you turned that inside out, because they'd done it so well. We were questioning whether it had actually been knitted in at one point.
Absolutely.
But what I'd noticed as you were doing that is even back in the day, they were having problems. You can see where the heat transfer machine has gone onto the fabric and it's actually left a block of singed fabric, if you like. But again, lovely, really nice. And I quite like the fact that it has done that, because imagine doing a lifestyle range of that. You could almost mimic that on purpose.
Totally.
You know?
Love the fact that that's been stitched in as well as a rib rather than it just being an overlaid tape. And as for this, I mean,
that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. But absolutely it is interesting that we do look at it through rose-tinted glasses. I think we reviewed a kit where there was a bit of Lurex thread action on it. This Lurex thread is something I have not seen on an embroidery
in about 100 years. Yeah. That's it, because that's what, 80s?
Exactly.
Something like that?
Yeah, this would have been like 1982-ish.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they can be forgiven. But what's interesting, though, if you think of where we would have been now, if you look at the logo placements, they're completely off, you know? So one's quite high, the other one's kind of dropping down the shirt. But I think that's what's nice. It's like when you're reviewing some of the original kits, it is looking at things like the flocks and, you know, this Arsenal kit's a really good example whereby it's the same sort of idea, but you can see how the flocks actually got really quite dirty.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of the fabrics they were using back in the day, I believe that this was pretty much 100% nylon.
Yeah. It's a good job the studio lights are LEDs or we wouldn't have been able to film this.
Absolutely. But, I mean, beautiful kits, and the history that goes behind some of these things is just unbelievable.
See, this reminds me of my first football shirt that I wore to play football. I was in the boys' brigade once upon a time, which is why I've turned out such a lovely man. And I remember it was an Admiral's shirt as well then that we had. And this fabric, I hated it. And I think it's...
We talk about nipple grinders. I mean, they would be bleeding after 90 minutes.
I would always have to wear a T-shirt underneath. I still remember it every time I've been selecting a fabric for a football shirt, of just thinking back to those days of being a little kid and being like, wow, man,
when you think about football kits in general, a lot of these kits were pioneers.
Yeah.
You know, they were the start of what we all love and collect today.
Yeah, I mean, this thing's from 1977. I wasn't even born.
Yeah.
So, this was probably one of the first really technical fabrics to have been used on a football shirt.
Yeah, well, definitely with Admiral, because they were kind of one of the leaders at the time as well. Totally. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting when you look through kits to see where they've come from and see that progression. I hate this kit, by the way. But anyway, we'll get onto that in a second. But yeah, so I think, if you ever see some of the more modern kits, they're definitely paying homage to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
But as great as the designers are, they're taking those little pieces of beauty, because as much as we've just slated that, the actual construction,
it's stunning.
It's beautiful.
The fibre that's not great.
Yeah, exactly.
And look how well
really
it's held its colour as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about sustainability, but this thing will still look like this in 10,000 years' time.
Yeah, pretty much. Right, come on, let's get this
the Liverpool one. So the thing that I do like about this, or at least that's interesting about it, is that there's
cut.
Yeah, there's no armhole seams at all. It's just a front and a back, which was what we did with the 2006 World Cup Italy shirt, and it's also what Puma have done with the 2021 Ultra Weave as well. So just removed all these additional seams. I think with this, it was probably less to do with aerodynamics and more to do with getting the 3 honking big stripes across the shoulder.
Well, I remember, I'm sure this was when they brought Adidas equipment out.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the back neck label, it's the Trefoil logo. And then if you look at obviously what's on the chest, it's the equipment logo.
Yep.
And I think that's why I didn't like it so much.
It's very 90s, wasn't it?
Well, it's very Germanic as well. It's very Adidas. And I guess that's come across as a criticism. It isn't. But I just think the Trefoil, for me, is just one of the most iconic logos in the industry. I never, ever liked it. Probably also because Liverpool at the time were winning everything.
Yeah, the Bayern Munich one was really nice, but these 3 stripes were in royal blue, so it wasn't quite as stark a contrast.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'd even forgot that they did these sorts of things. So this is the bubble flock.
Yeah.
So there's actually like foam. So if you were to peel that back, which we obviously will not do, but if you were to peel that back, there's actually little pieces of foam that sit in behind that, which gives it this raised technique. Yeah. And then it's this flock detail.
A big thing in that era, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, definitely.
And that was definitely something as well that we would look to move on over time. Flock didn't really go away. There was like the 3D thing, which is now making a bit of a comeback as well. There were quite a few evolutions of that rather than just, throwing it away. It kept moving forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, which I think's been quite interesting, if we bring it bang up to date now, if you see some of these kits, you'd be forgiven to think that this is a kit from back in the day, but in actual fact it's not. It's a direct remake of the Napoli jerseys that were being made back in the day when Maradona was playing for them.
Yeah.
Got the classic Mars logo on it, but they have made this stitch for stitch exactly the same as the kit back in the day.
Even where, like these days, you wouldn't accept the rib doing that. You'd be like, it's got to be red.
But it was done that way because I think at the time it was very because the elastane would always come in white.
Yeah.
So that's why you've got that coloration change. But I actually really quite like that now.
It's quite a cool feature.
It's quite cool. It'd be better if you were a Sunderland fan, but it's cool.
So nothing's better when you're a Sunderland fan, is it?
No, at the minute it's not. So I really quite like this. And again, these are things that Subside Sports have managed to get a hold of.
Yeah.
So really like them. But on top of that, we've got, honestly, these are absolutely awesome. So this is, again, another Napoli kit. The logo that's on there is exactly how it was done. So if you run your hands over that, you can hardly get your hand over it because it's so sticky.
Really high density screen print.
Yeah, but it's actually knitted.
Yeah.
Out of a wool fabrication.
It's almost like an old golf shirt or something, isn't it?
I wonder whether Subside will get this back. We might have to give this up.
I think we should give
competition.
It away. If you want us to give it away, hit the like button.
Yeah, I'm just trying to check the composition of the fabric. Yeah, so it's a limited edition. Absolutely stunning.
Fabric composition, 100% glory.
Yeah, here we go. It's 100% acrylic.
Wow.
All made in Italy. It probably would have been acrylic back in the day as well. So that is an absolute cracker. I love that. And more importantly, they've done a bunch of them.
Interestingly, it's not so long ago that Napoli released the 13th kit of the season that had Maradona's face on it in red. And there was huge uproar about red not being a Napoli colour.
Well, it absolutely was.
Yeah, here we are.
Was. Because that, again, is the other kit that he wore.
Yep.
Absolutely superb.
And what a sponsor logo as well. Between that and Mars, unbelievable.
Yeah, and it goes on. Roma. And again, same thing.
Yeah.
They are absolutely
crest
stunning.
On the sleeve there's amazing.
So this is completely brand new, modern, up-to-date, paying homage back to all the stuff that we take inspiration from. So it just shows the collectors that we love in this community are actually shaping the way that brands are looking at product now.
Totally.
They're actually going back into their archives themselves and remaking them. And it's thanks to that community that we love so much, because they are literally clambering after this sort of stuff, trying to find the old school ones. These are absolutely superb.
Yeah,
so if you can get a hold of these, they're quite pricey, like about 300 quid a pop.
They're great, but I think you'd have to be very committed to want one. But if you were,
so
you wouldn't regret it. So
here's the question though, right? Would you go out in that? Would you rock that with a pair of jeans, a nice pair of trainers, and rock it?
Once upon a time I would have. Pre-dad bod. I definitely would have.
I hear what you're saying, but I would, man. That's like another level of football kit wearing.
Totally.
It's really smart.
Yeah.
Really smart. Love it. Absolutely love it. Great job. Which pretty much brings us to an end of the review. Obviously, there's thousands and thousands of kits that we can review. And if you've got some ideas of other vintage kits that we can have a look at.
Yeah, let us know your particular favourites.
Indeed. Our plan is to make this a little bit more of a feature, just to talk about vintage kits. So, thanks to Subside Sport, and we'll catch out with you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Cheers.
LIVERPOOL Liverpool FC. They used to sing that.